Getting excited? All right, we're back on the 4-Wheel Underground project. We got Timmy and we got Chris. So let's jump right in. Let's tell you a little bit more about what we got going on here today and what we're doing with the front axle.
The front axle is a little different from the rear. We're going to keep some of the brackets, as you can see on the 4-Wheel Underground front Ford Super Duty front axle truss PDF. We're going to be a little more selective on the brackets and what we cut off on this. He provides some templates for these bushings right here. These top bushings are going to become the lower link mount points, and so basically he provided this template and we're going to kind of just trace around it, and this is what we're going to keep. We'll show you that in a second. First, we're going to go ahead and remove the knuckles and the axle shafts, try to make the axle a little bit lighter so it's a little easier to manage. I had already pulled these wheel bearings already, but basically to get the wheel bearing out, you got to pull the locking hub cover off, which is 3 Allen head screws, and then you pull this little C-clip out. There's 4 nuts on the back that just hold the wheel bearing to the knuckle, and they're already loose because I left them loose because I knew I was replacing the wheel bearings.
So with those nuts removed, Chris was able to slide this off, and this is basically the wheel bearing and the locking hub assembly. So that's off, and then now what we're going to do is we're going to get a big pry bar right here and pry the axle shaft out of the differential tube. So with the big pry bar, we've broken it loose so we can slide the long axle shaft out of here.
That's got some serious corrosion there.
Yeah.
Okay, now with the axle shafts removed and the wheel bearing assembly out, we can remove these knuckles, and that'll really make this axle a lot easier to manage. A little cotter pan, nab it.
It's a pretty big nut there.
Don't bust that nut just yet.
What size is that thing?
Feels way more happy with the 28. All right, and then we're gonna use the Milwaukee 1/2-inch impact to bust these nuts.
Gotta love Milwaukee.
Yeah, we had to go to the store, get a special Milwaukee socket. 1 5/16. All right, Milwaukee for the win.
Turn up the torque. Heard something.
Yeah, I think it's free. Yeah, that was it.
Pickle forked it.
So we're getting these ball joints off these knuckles.
Well, good thing we're not reusing this clip. And it's gone.
And it's gone.
And it's gone.
So what did you also do here, Chris? You cut that off because we didn't have the right press sleeves.
Well, we probably didn't need to cut this off. We thought it pressed out a different way. Well, yeah, we'll show you how to do that one in a second. First, you got to get the bottom one off so that you can put the threads of the clamp through this hole to get this one out. So we kind of had to come up with a makeshift adapter for this one. This sleeve isn't long enough. It's like a bearing out of wheel bearing somewhere. I think we got to get it started first, like that.
There it is.
Okay, now we got the wheel bearing going on. There's a lot of other ways you can get it off, but this is the easiest what we had.
If you had a press sleeve kit like we use when we do axles and stuff like that, that press sleeve kit would probably work a little better, but we'll see.
There we have it. Now that we got these knuckles removed, we can start trimming up some of these brackets. Okay, so first we're gonna chop the original shock mount off. We don't need this at all, so we gotta kind of trim it to the axle tube a little bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and chop this whole bushing off. And then after we get this side done, we're gonna move to this side, do the same thing, take the original shock mount off, and then we'll cut this bushing off as well. This one I used the template to kind of trace out that line. The other side, you can use a template too, but I need to cut this off to be able to get a good template trace on this side. So let's get started and start cutting some of these brackets off.
Chris and I have been doing battle with all of these things that we need to cut off this front axle. This area between the inner C and the differential is kind of hard to get to, and what we decided to do is attack the welds that hold the ring onto the axle tube, and it worked out pretty good. Sometimes we didn't cut the weld enough and we had to work at it a little more. Once we weakened the welds, we used an air hammer from Ingersoll Rand and we were able to knock them free. So now it's way less work to get this all the way smooth. I'll show you what it looks like on the other side and you'll get a better idea of why this is working out so well, so we don't have to do as much cutting and grinding. So you can see part of what we've already cut off of the ring that is welded around the circumference of the axle tube. There's welds that we can attack, and we're going to demonstrate what we did on the other side for you. Before we start weakening the welds for the remainder of the rings, we're going to weaken the weld for this piece that we've partially cut off. That's an example of how we're getting some of these pieces off by weakening the weld either with the Milwaukee angle grinder or the Milwaukee hacksaw, and then hitting it with the Ingersoll Rand air chisel, and it's making the work go a little bit easier. For these tight areas, Chris has a really cool tool from Milwaukee. It's a band file. It has a really skinny sanding belt to get into tight areas like this area right here where he's working on. On this side, I'm going to be using the Milwaukee die grinder with a flap disc to smooth out these areas. Another way we're using the Milwaukee angle grinder is with some fiber discs. This will remove the material a little bit faster than the die grinder. The die grinder is really good for tight areas. So now you can see the difference after taking a die grinder to it with a sandy disc, angle grinder with a sandy disc. There's a few areas that we cut a little bit too deep when we were cutting off the brackets. So Chris is going to put some beads like right here. There's a little bit of material eaten up. He's going to weld it and then sand it smooth. And then a couple other areas where we cut just a little bit too deep, but we're getting there. We're almost done. There is another template that we have to use to cut some material off these sections off both sides of the front axle. That's probably going to be the last thing we do before mocking things up and tacking the truss to the axle tube.
Okay, so this is the template for trimming these brackets right here. These basically need to be clearance for coilovers. Just kind of line it up like that with the bolt hole, and then kind of line this edge up with this. Just make a mark right in here.
And that's the radius that you have to cut off?
That's the radius that has to be cut off. And then I think that goes like that. Something like that. And then same thing for the other side.
We got done grinding these areas on both sides. You can't see all sides of the axle, but we cut off stuff underneath there. You saw that earlier. Same on this side. We cut pieces off, and we cut pieces off each of the ends too. There was a lot of cutting, a lot of grinding, a lot of sanding. But now comes the fun part. We actually get to fit pieces on and start welding. Woohoo! Woohoo! We're done cleaning up the axle. We're currently fitting our first piece onto the axle, and that's this plate that blocks off the bottom of the bushing housing. Chris is just doing the fine tuning, making sure it's gonna fit right, and then he's gonna tack it in place. All right, Chris has it tacked in place. Now he can complete welding around the whole perimeter of the plate. You know what? I think the boy can weld. Yeah, looks good.
To get the truss fitted up, we have to remove the stock front diff cover and put on the 4-wheel underground diff cover, because the truss bolts to the diff cover, and the diff cover kind of helps locate the truss and where it needs to go. So we're gonna pull this off and get the oil drained out.
What size fasteners are those?
9/16.
There he goes. There we go. Oh, ooh, man. If I was an elephant, that would be my load that would come out.
It's a big load.
Yeah. So Chris has the 4Wheel Underground diff cover on with a couple of the countersunk Allen bolts. He's just going to use a couple just to get it affixed to the differential so we could bolt the truss to the top with a couple other countersunk bolts.
All right, so we got the truss kind of loosely mocked up, just enough to kind of get us some good Sharpie marks of where we need to grind down on the axle and maybe trim up a little bit of metal on the truss to kind of get it to sit. Like you can see right here, it's not perfectly flat yet, and there's a little gap right there. But yeah, so we're gonna start marking some of this area out with Sharpie. And I'm also gonna wanna weld the axle tubes to the axle, so we're gonna clean that area up too.
So we're going to be marking and sanding and grinding to get a better fitment of the truss and to where we can get nice, strong welds. We almost got the other two pieces of the truss fitting well on the axle. It looks like it's high right here, like right there in the middle right there.
Yeah.
A little more right there?
That right there, yeah. That's just about as good as it gets, Playboy.
Looks good?
Looks good.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, brother. And that piece goes over like that.
I need to kind of tap that down a little bit.
We've got it mocked up pretty good. Now we're gonna use our Milwaukee die grinder and probably wire wheels to get all the paint off of the areas we're gonna be welding. Instead of using a wire wheel for the tighter areas where we need to weld, Chris has a sandblaster, so he's gonna do a little demonstration here.
All right, so now we're about to weld the axle tubes to the center section. We cleaned this up real nice with the sandblaster last night. And first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna preheat it to about 400 degrees with this big weed burner torch. Then we're gonna do 1-inch sections of weld and then flip it, do the opposite side, do 1 inch, flip it, get all the opposite sides until it all turns into one weld around the whole center section. Then we'll do a little post heat. Then we'll peen it with the needle scaler and then wrap it with a fiberglass blanket and let it cool until it cools down all the way on its own. This isn't necessarily part of the instructions of the 4Wheel Underground kit, but this is pretty much standard procedure for all axles with center sections that have tubes that are pressed in. You always want to weld the tubes to the center section so that the tubes don't spin in the center section.
So the way the factory does it, they just do these little plugs and that's
They
good
just
enough.
do those little plug welds, and then it's not really for a heavy duty application. I guess the rag
Oh
was
yeah, it was holding pressure. Maybe let's take this thing out so pressure, yeah. It built up pressure. That's more than an inch.
about an inch.
That's about 2 inches.
Whatever, all right, flip it over. Just gonna do a quick post heat.
We have the front diff cover bolted on with a couple bolts. The truss bolts up to it with a couple slotted nuts with Allen bolts, and we have it fitting really nice. And coming over to the passenger side, you have a center section that joins the furthest passenger side with the driver side. So you see that? And so it's fitting all really nice on the axle. We are finally at the point where we could start tacking things in place and start getting the welding done. And just like we heated up the differential housing, because that's cast steel, to weld the tube to the center section, we're gonna also heat up the cast steel to about 400 degrees before we weld sections like this. We're ready to start tacking it in place, and this middle section right here, we're not gonna tack that in place first because we have some welds that we need to complete underneath that section, and then we can put it in place. All right, Chris has a couple of the truss pieces tacked in place. Now we're gonna start laying down some dimes. All right, Chris did a nice job of welding in that area underneath the center truss. Now he's gonna fit it in place and tack that in. Just has to center it on both of those trusses to each side. That needs to come over to be more centered. Even more. Gotta be pretty, man. It's gotta be perfect. That's looking pretty centered.
Looks good to Tim.
Yep, I would tack it. We're doing pretty good on the welding, but we just fit this piece in that goes over this area that holds the bushing, and we're realizing that in order to weld this piece in, we really want this bushing out of here. And so Chris looked up some videos on how to do it, and he's gonna try the air hammer technique and try to drive that bushing out. We're gonna go for the other one. Now that we got both of the bushings knocked out, Chris has that piece fitted onto the bushing bracket, and he's gonna tack it in place. Now Chris is gonna take a hammer to it and see if he can get this piece of the bracket fitting tighter onto the bushing bracket. There you go, there you go. We've got most of the welding done. The things that are left are the areas of the cast steel that we first have to heat up to around 400 degrees to do welds like this and welds like that. But Chris and I have been doing some pretty good welding. We got this bracket welded on. Chris did some good welds around that corner. I did a few of them down here. But yeah, it's looking pretty damn good. We've got that end of the axle up to temperature. Now we're gonna do some welding on that side. We did the welding onto the cast steel, and now there's these other two little pieces that come with the kit that we've already cleaned up, and we're fitting them in, and we figured we're just gonna try to weld these in place before we wrap it with the fiberglass blanket to let it cool gradually.
And then this thing is the pin hard bracket, so that's supposed to fit over that, and it does. Yeah, I think we're gonna need to grind a little bit down here and there, but I think we'll make it fit good.
So we got those two halves tacked in place, and Chris has welded one side, I'll weld the other side?
Something like that.
Okay. We finished this side. We have it wrapped with the fiberglass blanket to let it cool slowly. And then now we're working on this side, and Chris already has the parts that are gonna go in here. He's trimmed them up to where they're gonna fit really nice. So as soon as we complete the welding onto this part of the axle, then we're gonna set these other two pieces in, weld those, and then wrap it. All right, we're back on the next day. We let the axle cool slowly, wrapped in the fiberglass blankets. Everything is looking good on both ends. Let's give you a little bit of a view here. And then the other side that we had wrapped, we have it all welded in there. And then the next area we're gonna be concentrating on is this area right here. We're gonna heat it up to about 400 degrees. We're gonna do this weld, and then we're gonna come over here. We're gonna weld these slots. And then a couple additional ones that I think we're gonna do is right here, and then on the opposite side, right down in there. So we're gonna get the big blowtorch out and heat this baby up. All right, we completed the welds. We got this weld done and we welded the slots and then we welded the corners. We decided not to do those ones because of the gap. We think it's gonna be plenty sturdy. Now Chris is gonna peen the welds and we're gonna heat it up with the torch again, then wrap it in the fiberglass blankets. All right, we got her wrapped up. We're gonna let it cool nice and slowly and we'll figure out what we're gonna do next. Now what we're working on is fitting the panhard bracket to the passenger side of the front axle. Once we got the fitment we want, then we'll tack it in place and get that sucker welded on. All right, we've got the panhard bracket connected. I'm not gonna win any welding awards, but that sucker ain't going anywhere.
As part of this Super Duty front 3-link system, I also added the Hydo-Assist option, and it comes with these kind of gussets that go on the steering arms, and you have to drill out the tie rod holes to 1 inch to accept some of these massive bolts. And that's what we're going to do next, is we're going to drill out these holes to 1 inch.
Chris is first going to use a step drill bit to get the hole just a little bit bigger, then he'll go to an actual longer drill bit. We're going to start off small and then work our way up to the 1 inch size. That's a big hole. That's what he said. What kind of drill are you using?
Got a nice Milwaukee Fuel M18.
We like Milwaukee. So with the step drill bit, Chris was able to get it to the 1 inch size on that side he's drilling from, and now he's just going to the 1 inch drill bit and he's gonna go for it. What is that stuff you're dabbing into there?
Anchor lube. This stuff really keeps the drill bits nice and cool.
Anchor lube, okay. He's gonna finish it up by using the step drill bit from underneath. There it is. Gonna go through with the big bit one more time?
Yeah, from the top.
We're gonna do the same on the other knuckle.
We got the passenger side Hydo-Assist knuckle kit just kind of roughly bolted it together. We're going to mark with a Sharpie everywhere on the knuckle we need to grind down to get nice clean metal. And this is 1 3/4 misalignment spacers. This is 1.5 inch misalignment spacers. It shows on his little schematic that he has. And then this is a Heim that comes with the Hydro Ram from PSC that I got. Yeah, so let's mark this up. And this last piece kind of just goes over right here. So we're gonna grind right here. Yeah, so now we'll take it all apart, grind it all down and get it ready. We got the whole knuckle all cleaned up. We're gonna show you how it gets put together. So the first step is really to get the sleeve. Put it around this super big 1 inch bolt. So the first one we're gonna slide on is going to be this one. It has like a bend right here. And we're gonna just slide it on right in here like that. Make sure you hold the tube so that goes together like that. Next one is this one. Slide it on as well. You're just gonna get all these brackets on so that it's easier to put the bolt with the sleeve in. The next one kind of looks like a little bit of like a rubber ducky. And this one also gets slid on next. And then the last one that goes on the top of the knuckle, it's like a bigger rubber ducky one.
Rubber ducky, you're the one.
And that one just goes to the bottom of the sleeve like that. And then this just slides right in there like that. And so now we got all the pieces kind of roughly where they're gonna go. But basically the main thing is that the sleeve is all the way down. This piece is touching the knuckle. Then we got this last piece with this thick steel washer. And this is gonna go right on the bottom. And then so I don't have to use up the nylon part of this nut, I have like a little spacer that I'm using between the end of the bolt and the nut, so the nut doesn't have to go all the way onto the bolt. And so I'm just gonna get this nut on the bolt kind of loose for now, just so that this all kind of gets held together.
Here's another shot of what the plates look like that we currently have on the knuckle. So starting from the top and then going down, it's almost like the Playboy bunny rabbit head without the ears. And then we have the small rubber ducky plate, and then we have the bigger rubber ducky plate. And then I'll give you a shot from this side so you get an idea of what it looks like. And what Chris is working on right now, he's making some aluminum shims, because we don't want to weld it up and then find that we can't get the heim joints in. So these really thin aluminum shims are going to help prevent that. Chris just cut up an aluminum can and is making those spacers.
The first part we're going to install is this heim joint from my PSC hydraulic ram kit, and we're going to use 2 of these aluminum washers, 1 on each side, to make sure that after we get it welded up, we can still pull it out and reinstall it easily. And just get this nut on loosely. Then the next bolt we're going to install is this one. Just get a washer on top. We're going to do the same thing with the aluminum washers, 1 on each side. These misalignment spacers are supposed to equal out to 1.5 inches. So 1 on the bottom, 1 on the top. And then again, I got different nuts just so I don't melt the nylock portion of the nut. And this is just temporary for while I'm welding it up. Okay, got that loosely fitted up. And then the last one, these misalignment spacers are supposed to equal out to 1.75 inches, but we got the wrong misalignment spacers, but we found washers that equal out to exactly 1/4 inch. So we're gonna go ahead and use the washers as spacers temporarily until we get the right misalignment spacers. And again, just another aluminum washer, top and bottom, and then another bolt. Oh, there we go. And then get the nut on there loosely. Then we're gonna go ahead and install this outer piece. This just clicks into all these little tabbing slots.
Okay, all the tabs are lined up.
Yep. This piece just goes right in here. And it clicks into a tabbing slot on the top and on the side. And then this piece, this covers over this little nub right here. Just gotta kind of shift those out. And that's kind of why you gotta leave everything a little bit loose, is so that you can shift stuff around to get all the pieces in.
So you can see where this plate that Chris installed engages with the beak of the rubber ducky. This one and this one. We've got the knuckle on the welding bench, and Chris is gonna start tacking the plates in several locations to hold it all together.
Okay, so I measured this heim joint with some digital calipers, and I got the exact measurement, and I just ended up putting some washers here instead, just because I don't want to have to keep fiddling with taking this in, putting it out while it's all hot. We're going to heat up the knuckle to like 300, 400 degrees, and so I figured it'd be better to just get some washers in there and not mess with the plastic and Teflon inside this heim joint, because we don't want to burn it. I think now we're going to go ahead and weld all the steel, the regular mild steel, and then we'll get the knuckle heated up and we'll weld the bracket to the knuckle after we're done welding the regular steel.
We've got most of it welded up. Now Chris is removing the big bolt so he can get access to a few more welds he needs to make. Now Chris is undoing the other 2 bolts so he can get in there and do a little bit more welding on the inside. There's a final plate that makes up this knuckle gusset, and it's this kind of like candy cane sort of thing, not full candy cane, but like a curved piece. We're gonna get that fitting well tacking in place. Nice work, bruh. It's time to heat up the whole knuckle to about 400 degrees and do the welds like right here, right at the edge of that plate that he just finished welding. Anywhere where we're welding the gusset to the knuckle, up here at this little V section. So we gotta break out the big blowtorch. We finished all the welding and we're wrapping it up like a burrito in the fiberglass blanket, and we'll show you tomorrow what the welds look like. For now, it's gonna be nice and toasty in its little blanket overnight.
Gotta put that brisket to bed.
Yep. All right, the knuckle has cooled off. We took the fiberglass blanket off of it, and you could see some of our handiwork. A whole lot of welding goes into this knuckle. So many different pieces that have to be put together and welded to the knuckle. The plates have to be welded together, just in so many different spots. So I'll just give you a kind of a look 360 of all the different welds we had to do to put this knuckle together. And you'll get to see the inside here. And Chris and I feel we have it welded up more than enough to where it's going to be really strong. We were debating on welding a little bit more on the inside, but after talking about it, we feel that there's sufficient welds that's going to be really strong. So it's going to be up to you whether or not you want to do some welding on the inside as well. So use your own judgment, but this sucker is now ready to go, and we're going to start working on the other knuckle, which is a lot less involved. We've got the plates fitted up, and it's going to be a lot easier to weld this one, but you can see we're going to have to weld onto the knuckle here. So again, we're going to have to heat this up to 400 degrees with a big torch, and then I'll flip it over and show you the other side. We're going to weld in here too to the knuckle, and then flip it over, and then we're going to put a nice big fat bead right there. And then if I flip it over one more time, we got some welding in here too. So this one is mainly welding it to the knuckle. The other one was a whole lot of pieces that we had to piece together. So this one's going to be a lot more straightforward to weld.
Getting excited?
All right, and just like the other knuckle, we're gonna get this one heated up to about 350 to 400 and get it all welded up.
All right, we got this knuckle up to temperature, and Chris is going to get welded. All right, we're going to wrap this one up, and that's a wrap. Now Chris and I are working on putting the new bushings into the front axle.
Got the new bushings right here.
He's just lubricating it with a little bit of assembly lube to make the insertion a little bit easier. You know, you could just shove it in dry if you want, but like, you know, got to be nice to these things. Got to have a sense of humor, people. Don't take us too seriously.
Everything's gonna be okay.
That's going to be okay. All right, all lubricated up. All right, so what are we going to be using to press these things in?
We got a piece of 1/2 inch all thread, 1/2 inch nut, thick 1/2 inch washer, a 1 inch 4-bolt flange, and then another 1 inch 4-bolt flange, a small section of 4-inch pipe that we kind of cut and made smaller so that the flange wouldn't push through. You can use PVC, you can use steel pipe. The bushing needs to get pushed through like maybe 1/2 inch on the other side. So that's why we need something to hold the bushing on the other side.
You need something to receive it.
To receive it.
Did you learn this from a YouTube video or
I
something?
did, and I don't remember the name of the YouTuber that did this.
It's not a whole lot of room, huh?
There's not. There is not a whole lot of space. You might need to cut this down a smidge. The other thing is these 4-bolt flanges are kind of thick too.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just try to press it with this just to get it going, and then we'll see about that.
Okay.
Just to make sure that it's going to work good.
Yeah, I guess you could press it into where it meets up with that 4-bolt flange and then go from there. All right, so you see the setup. I've said this many times with press work. You're only limited by your own imagination and ingenuity. So piece of all thread, a couple of those flanges, a nut and a washer, and you got yourself an ability to do some press work. We failed on this first attempt for this bushing on this side of the front axle, and I think it was because the bushing was going in crooked, and we should have just stopped and reset before breaking the all thread. So that's perfectly square, and we were like that. So we're gonna just go for this other side first and then come back to the side we failed on. This time we're not gonna keep going. If we see the thing going in crooked, we're gonna stop and reset. A lot of times when you're doing press work, the thing will auto correct and it'll start driving in straight if you give it enough force, but we're not going to do that unless we want to have to go back to the hardware store and buy more all thread. That might be fully seated.
I think we're good.
I think that's it. All right, take 2 on the
Driver's
original
side.
bushing that we failed on and broke the all thread. Let's see if we can get it this time. We went from 1/2 inch to 5/8. We cut down the all thread so we can get onto the nuts with a socket on one end. And let's see how this goes. This bushing doesn't need to be pressed all the way against this side of the arm. And the way we figured that out is we looked at some other videos and then we looked at our own footage and realized this flange of the bushing wasn't pressed all the way up against this arm. We're just going by our best guess, but what we want to impart to you to take a measurement of how much of a gap is right here so you can mimic that on the reinsertion of the new bushing. So now we can finally call the bushing replacement done on this front axle. All right, this concludes episode 4. We are going to be welding on some other parts onto the axle, but we will be covering that when we're doing the fitment of the axle on the rig. Join us in episode 5 where we show you how to do a rebuild / re-gear of the front differential. Peace out, happy wrenching, happy solid axle swapping, bye-bye.